It is hard to believe it today, but in 1971, two jokers put up a billboard outside of Seattle, asking the last person to leave the city to please turn off the light. Boeing was laying off workers, and just as no one could imagine a Detroit with a smaller General Motors, no one could imagine a Seattle with a smaller Boeing. This was before Microsoft had made Seattle synonymous with software, or Amazon had made Seattle synonymous with e-commerce, or Starbucks had made Seattle synonymous with fancy coffee. Seattle may well be the extreme example of a former industrial city that has transformed itself into a capital of the information age. Seattle's recent success owes much to its educated population. An astonishing 58% of the city's adults have a college degree or more. 24% of adults have an advanced degree. To put that in perspective, compare Seattle with Boston, the self-proclaimed Athens of America, where only 45% of adults have a college degree and only 20% of adults have an advanced degree. To understand why Seattle is so skilled, we need to turn to its history. Native Americans lived around Seattle for thousands of years. The city's name honors Chief Seale, who kept his followers out of the Yakima War, in which the natives tried to unsuccessfully eject the settlers from the east. Seattle was incorporated in 1869, and the city's population grew from 1,100 to 43,000 in the 20 years between 1870 and 1890. In those early years, Seattle was a lumber capital, thriving off the plentiful woods of the Pacific Northwest. Natural resources provided the original impetus to occupy the American West, and some of that wealth was plowed back into Seattle's educational system. In 1897, the steamship Portland arrived in Seattle from Alaska, allegedly carrying a ton of gold. The great Klondike gold rush was on, and Seattle grew as a departure point for prospectors heading north. The famous Seattle retailer Nordstrom's was founded with gold rush money. To celebrate the 10th anniversary of the gold rush, the city hosted the Alaska-Yukon-Pacific Exposition. The exposition took place at the University of Washington and provided an opportunity to landscape and develop the campus of Seattle's educational anchor. That exposition exposed Seattle to manned flight. A gas-powered dirigible hovered above the UW campus. William Edward Boeing saw a far more impressive display of flight at the Los Angeles air races of 1910. Boeing's father had made a fortune from timber and mining in Michigan and sent his son to Yale. That son then moved west, making himself even wealthier by shipping the wood of the Pacific Northwest eastward, eventually taking advantage of the opening of the Panama Canal. When Boeing watched airplanes soar over the City of Angels, he caught the flying bug. He studied with LA aviation pioneer Glenn Martin and then bought one of Martin's seaplanes. When the plane needed new parts, Martin told him that it would take months. So Boeing decided to go into the airplane building business himself. He partnered with Navy Commander George Westervelt, an MIT-trained engineer. They had, appropriately enough, met at the city's University Club, and together they built Boeing's first seaplane in 1916. Cities have long nurtured such creative partnerships. World War I pulled Westervelt back east. The war also enabled Boeing to start selling its planes to the U.S. Navy. Early airplanes were made from wood, and Washington's ready supply of spruce gave Boeing an edge. During the 1920s, Boeing kept on building planes and then using those planes to carry airmail. Boeing's Air Transport Wing would be one of the parent companies of United Airlines. Boeing's aviation innovations are stunning. Luxurious clippers which could cross the oceans, stratoliners with pressurized cabins that could climb above the turbulence, flying fortresses that could bomb European cities to cinders, America's first commercial jet airplane, the 707, and the massive 747, still a mainstay of the world's jet set. All those innovations depended on some of the world's best aviation engineers. Building airplanes is a big business, with massive returns to scale. No one starts building 747s in their garage. Consequently, the company's early success enabled a dominance which continued to this day. Boeing grew to be Seattle's Uber employer, whose ups and downs dictated the economic fortunes of the city. Boeing had slashed its employment from over 100,000 in 1968 to 33,000 in 1971, responding both to a decrease in Vietnam-era military orders and a general economic slowdown. Seattle suffered enormously. The unemployment rate reached 13%, perhaps the highest in the nation, and that billboard rose ominously on the city's edge. But Seattle came back. One unfortunate side effect of having a dominant local company like Boeing is that it can kill off local entrepreneurship. Smart local kids end up working for the hometown whale, not starting their own firm. Unsurprisingly then, the early pioneers of Seattle's information age began somewhere else. Bill Gates was the son of a prominent Seattle attorney. The elder Gates had been educated at the University of Washington thanks to the GI Bill. The younger Gates started his programming career, together with Paul Allen, using the University of Washington's computers. Gates went to Harvard, dropped out, and joined Allen to develop an interpreter that would enable hobbyists to use the computer language BASIC to program the Altair 8800, a kit microcomputer. Gates and Allen had originally set up shop in Albuquerque, where the Altairs were made, but in 1979 they relocated their company, Microsoft, to Bellevue, Washington, a suburb of Seattle. Seattle had educated those two entrepreneurs, and it brought them home, partially because of its supply of well-educated workers. The great difference between Detroit's car industry and Seattle's aviation industry is that Boeing's engineers were much better educated than GM's assembly line workers. Consequently, even though Boeing didn't inculcate entrepreneurship, it did create a solid wealth of human capital that would later draw entrepreneurs to the city. Jeff Bezos had few ties to Seattle before moving there to found Amazon in 1994. Coincidentally, he was born in Albuquerque, lived in Miami, and then went to Princeton. He worked on Wall Street first as a computer engineer and then finding internet-related investments for the hedge fund D.E. Shaw. When Bezos set out to start his online bookshop, he chose Seattle because the city had plenty of bookstores and plenty of software engineers, both of which reflected the city's high level of education. Amazon is unlike Boeing or Microsoft in its location. It is in the heart of the city itself, not on the urban edge. Boeing, of course, makes big planes. It needed space that just wasn't available in the dense urban core. Microsoft relocated during the 1970s, at the height of America's suburban boom. Amazon also started in the suburbs, but its South Lake Union campus is deeply urban, and that makes sense. Amazon doesn't need huge amounts of production space, and its workers like the fun of a city. Young tech people want cool cafes more than suburban tract houses. Seattle is succeeding as a place of pleasure as well as productivity. It benefits from its connections to the East. 13% of Seattle's residents are Asian, and smart Asian immigrants have helped build its technology boom. Seattle has come back because of entrepreneurs like Gates and Bezos, and because of Starbucks and Costco and a host of other smart companies that didn't even exist in 1971. No central planner could have predicted or created Seattle's outpouring of economic ingenuity. In a sense, Seattle is a prime example of the mantra that the best way to encourage economic development is to attract and train smart people and then get out of their way. Seattle is certainly full of brains, and its IQ has enabled it to get past the economic doldrums of the 1970s and become a computer-powered success story.